It is the mother of all bagels. In August 2004, to celebrate its 20th anniversary, Bruegger's Bagels of New York set the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest bagel on earth, using 66 pounds of flour, 900 gallons of water, 53 pounds of malt, and a construction crane. A 9-person team baked a 6-foot wide, 20-inch high, 868-pound bagel. After the judging was over, the slices of the bagel were sold along with a t-shirt that read, "I saw history in the baking." Proceeds went to local food banks. We're in a series called Follow. We're looking at the life of Jesus in the book of Mark, and today it is Jesus and bagels. Kind of. You'll see where we're going in just a minute. We're in Mark chapter 6. We're in the last part of Mark chapter 6. Last week, at the very beginning of Mark 6, we saw Jesus send his disciples out in pairs to teach and to heal. And the really interesting thing is that he gave them his authority and he gave them his ability to actually do some of the same miracles and healings that he himself had done. And Mark 6:13 tells us that the disciples cast out many demons and healed many sick people. And this is where we're going to pick up the story. Jump down to Mark chapter 6, verse 30 is when they return home. It says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Can you imagine their excitement? I mean, they get to watch Jesus heal people, and now they can do it too. Incredible. And the word obviously spreads because verse 31 tells us of those large crowds that were following Jesus. Okay, well, now they get even larger is what it says. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Once again, we see Jesus and his disciples in a place where they are so busy, they don't even have time to eat. You know, we picture Jesus and his disciples as serene and peaceful and slow and floating and kind of Zen-like, right? But that's not the way it was at all. As a matter of fact, they were constantly managing chaos. They were constantly dealing with crowds and crowds of people with all sorts of expectations. And Jesus knows that the more urgent the need is to do, the more important the need is to be. The more urgent the need is to do, the more important the need is to be. And so he says to his disciples, "Come with me to a quiet place and get some rest." You know, we have seen this same theme repeatedly in Scripture, and that is because we need to hear it. We need to really understand this truth and learn how to live it. Now, most of us are not managing crowds, but all of us are managing chaos. All of us are managing expectations of one kind or another. And so we must learn how to create time to be with God. Yes, you were made to do stuff. We love to do stuff, and you were created for that, but doing must always flow out of being, or it will kill your soul, and eventually it will kill your body. So, create space in your life to be with God. That's what Jesus does, or at least he tries to do in verse 32. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. So far, so good. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So the crowd sees them go out in the boat. They calculate where Jesus and his disciples are headed. They race around the lake, and they are waiting for them when they arrive. There will be no rest today. Now, you might think that Jesus would be irritated because they chase him down, but not so. Verse 34. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Now that phrase, like sheep without a shepherd, is significant. If you were a first century Jew reading this, you would immediately recognize the reference to the prayer as a prayer of Moses just before he died. We can read this prayer in Numbers chapter 27, verse 15 to 17. This is Moses praying just before his death He says, "O Lord, you are the God who gives breath to all creatures. Please appoint a new man as leader for the community. Then give them someone who will guide them wherever they go, so the community of the Lord will not be like sheep without a shepherd." A couple things I want to notice here. First of all, the very thing Moses prayed that would not happen, that the people would be like sheep without a shepherd, has happened. When Jesus shows up, the very thing that Moses said, "Oh God, please don't let these people be like sheep without a shepherd." When Jesus appears on the scene, the people are what? They're like sheep without a shepherd. They have no one to lead them. They're lost, they're wandering, they're far from God. And this what Mark writes here, this is a serious indictment on the Jewish religious leaders. And it's not because there weren't enough of them. Okay, in Jesus' day, they actually had so many priests that they served on rotation for 30 days at a time, but only twice a year. Okay, so there were so many priests, they had to let them serve just twice a year. The Jews had plenty of priests, just not that many who cared enough to lead them to know and love and serve and experience God in His presence. Now, it would be really easy here for somebody to say, "Yeah, those pastors, they need to get their act together. They would just step up to the plate. Then lives would be transformed and hearts would be changed." And however, while it is certainly true that those of us who are pastors, we do need to step up, Scripture is also very clear that if you're a follower of Jesus, guess what? You are also a priest. You are also a pastor in a sense. Here's how Peter, Jesus' disciple, described it in 1 Peter 2, verse 9. He says, "You are a chosen people. You are royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession." And then listen to this. As a result, what? You can show others the goodness of God, for He called you out of the darkness into His wonderful light. Here's the thing. Central to following Jesus is being His priests, being His hands and feet to those around us and helping others experience His life. Do whatever you can to help those who are lost and wandering and far from God know and love and follow Jesus. Second thing I want to point out here is that Jesus has compassion. Jesus has compassion. He is exhausted. He's so tired. He's just trying to take a few moments to rest with His disciples, and He would have been fully justified in telling the crowd to go take a hike. I got to have some me time here. Leave me alone. But He doesn't. Instead, He sees their deep need and He feels for them. It says He had compassion. That word is something that comes from deep within. He felt for them. Jesus didn't care for people just because He was supposed to or because He was the Messiah and that's my job. These people are so needy, I guess we should help them, and since I'm in charge, I'm going to do it. No. Jesus cared for people because He loved them. Jesus cared for people because He loved them. He longed for them to find His healing, His refreshing, and His purpose. And guess what? That's what He wants for you, too. Oh, let's keep reading. Verse 35. By this time it was late in the day, so His disciples came to Him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." Those disciples are so practical. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest place to get a McShawarma is miles away. And by the way, yes, a McShawarma was actually a thing. They tried it in Israel for several years at McDonald's. You could get a McShawarma. The reason I know this is that my brother was in an actual McDonald's commercial for a McShawarma shot on location in Jerusalem. That's a whole different story. You can ask me about it someday if you like. Anyway, nearest place to get a McShawarma is miles away. So they say, Jesus, these people are getting hungry. Don't you think it's time to wrap it up? Don't you think so? Now we don't know if the disciples are actually concerned about the people or if they just want an hour of peace and quiet. But either way, it's about to get really interesting. Jesus turns to them, verse 37, "But He answered, 'You give them something to eat.'" you give them something to eat. Now, verse 44, toward the end of the story, it tells us that there were 5,000 men. That's not counting women and children. So if you add women and children, you're talking about a crowd of maybe 10,000, maybe even 15,000 people. So tell me this, how would you have responded to Jesus if he said, hey, you go get something for them to eat? What would you have said? Yeah, that's exactly what the disciples said. They said to him, Jesus, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Okay, the really funny thing here for me is they do the math. They do the math. This is how much it would cost. Somebody, maybe it was Matthew, since he's a tax collector, right? He's good with numbers. Somebody does a quick crowd estimate. Okay, 10,000 people, bread, paper plates, napkins, can of soda for everyone, generic, not brand name. That's about $3 a person times 10,000. That's 30 grand. Jesus, are you kidding me? We can't feed these people. We don't have that kind of money. And even if we did, where would we get the food? Even Amazon doesn't deliver this far out. Oh, those foolish disciples. You silly disciples, after all you've seen Jesus do, heal the paralytic, cast out demons, he raised a girl from the dead, for heaven's sake. After all you've seen him do you still have no idea that Jesus has the power to supply all that you need and more? Don't you understand, you silly disciples? I wonder how often we, you and I, miss what God wants to do simply because we don't give him the opportunity, because we know it's impossible. Like the disciples, we start counting heads, we run the numbers, we conclude, there's just no way. And so we either don't try or we come up with our own different kind of solution, and we never consider the fact that Jesus might want to do something we can't even imagine. I wonder how often we miss the God moments just because we don't wait for the opportunity and give him a chance. You know, when we launched The Crossing, it was the peak of the 2006-2007 housing bubble, and everyone, as we started a church, everyone said, Kendall, you gotta buy land. You have to get land for your church or you will never find it. It's gonna get all bought up. It will all be gone. And so we started looking, and it was hard to find anything that was reasonably priced. And finally we found this 5-acre plot with a big old 3,000 square foot house. They wanted $800,000 for it. And sometimes I wonder, what if I would have pushed for that? What if I would have found a way to raise 800 grand and buy those 5 acres with a big old house and just plowed forward with my plans? Would God have blessed it? Well, sure, he could have blessed it. But oh, what we would have missed as a church, the Grove, a lake, beauty, silence, solitude, a vision for a sacred space where people can experience God and pause and be and know and follow. Make no mistake, following Jesus does not mean sitting on your hands singing Kumbaya until God shows up. There is a time to move, but before we move, we must always stop and ask, God, where do you want to take us? God, how do you want us to step forward? How do you want to provide for us? Because he may have something in mind that you never thought of, because that's how he rolls. In this case, Jesus doesn't let the disciples hang there very long. He quickly takes charge. Verse 38, well, how many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. In other words, see, Jesus? There's no food here. Now you got to wonder, okay, there's no food here? Really? In 10,000 people, no food? Anyways, they see, Jesus, we got 5 bagels and 2 fish sticks. That's not even enough for the 10 or 12 of us, much less 10 or 12,000 people. Again, the disciples have absolutely no idea what Jesus is about to do. Jesus, of course, is not fazed. As always, he has completely got it under control. Verse 39, then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. Now, sometimes people get tripped up or skeptical about this miracle of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with 5 bagels and 2 fish sticks. They say, well, it defies the laws of nature. You can't just make bread appear. It's scientifically impossible. To which I would say 3 things. First of all, of course it defies the laws of nature. It wouldn't be a miracle if it didn't. Okay, by definition, a miracle is when God, who created and sustains the laws of nature, it's when God chooses to work outside those laws, to do something that doesn't normally occur. All right, that's the definition of a miracle, God working around, outside, in spite of the natural law. Second thing that's really important you need to know is that science has absolutely nothing to tell us about miracles. Okay, just because something can't be proven scientifically doesn't mean that it can't happen, because science can tell us only about things that are observable and repeatable and verifiable. So, for example, how did life arise on Earth? We can theorize about it, but you can't prove it scientifically. Matter of fact, life coming from non-life, more complex organisms coming from less complex organisms, guess what? That violates the second law of thermodynamics and is therefore scientifically impossible. Yet here we are. Thirdly, and most importantly, if Jesus really is who he claims to be, that is God in the flesh, if he really is who he claims to be, God in the flesh, who has the power to supersede the laws of nature, then of course he would and did do things like this. And in the end, that's what it comes down to. In the end, it really comes down to, do you believe that Jesus is who he says he is? Do you believe that he rose from the dead? Because if you believe Jesus rose from the dead, then multiplying fish and bread, well, that's kind of a minor miracle, right? There's something else that's really fascinating to me about this particular miracle. It is unlike any other in Mark, so far at least, in that nobody sees it. Did you notice that as we read? Okay, there's nobody who's amazed. There's no one who's astonished. There's no one who rushes to tell, oh, you're not going to believe what just happened here. Okay, nobody sees that Jesus performs a miracle right under their noses, and they don't even notice. Makes me wonder how often God does that. How often does God provide for us and we don't even notice? I think it happens all the time. Now, this miracle of the 5 bagels and the 2 fish sticks, it's a perfect picture of Jesus, of who he is and what he came to do. Because first of all, it shows us that nothing is impossible for Jesus. Okay, Jesus will take the very little that we have and he will use it to bring abundance. Jesus can turn a bag lunch into a buffet. Don't you ever think that what you have to bring to Jesus is too small for him to use? Don't you ever doubt that Jesus is entirely the Lord of your situation. Okay, because he is, and he can take whatever you give him and use it. Second thing I want you to notice here, verse 43, it says, they all ate and were satisfied. Jesus came to satisfy us, and he has the power. He has the power to feed us, body and soul. Jesus has the power to fill the empty places and heal the broken places and renew the weary places and shine his light in the dark places. And Jesus has the power to break the chains and to set us free. And even as he does that, he sends us out to help other people experience that power too. Don't ever forget that there are hungry people all around you. There are hungry people everywhere you look. And don't forget that Jesus wants us to take the 5 bagels and the 2 fish sticks that we have. He wants to take and use them to satisfy their hearts, their souls, their minds. I mentioned earlier that we're in this capital campaign, A Place to Call Home. And our goal is to raise $105,000 by the end of the year so we can live in the building that God is giving us. You know, for some of us, God has blessed us abundantly over the past year. And if you're one of those people, I really want to challenge you to bless Him back by giving generously and making a generous commitment. For others, though, I realize that you might feel like, I have so little. What good is that? Well, look what Jesus can do with 5 bagels and 2 fish sticks. The truth is that as each of us gives according to what God has given us, amazing things happen. Amazing things happen in us. Amazing things happen in our church. Amazing things happen in the lives of the hungry people around us. And so the question is, are you going to let Jesus move in you and then through you? Are you going to use whatever you have, however much or little it seems? Are you going to use what you have and join Jesus in His work of satisfying hearts and souls and minds? Are you going to?